Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Headley Headspaces, and this headspace is called Why is Mr. Trump trying to get rid of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela? Now, before I jump into this headspace, I want to thank everyone who's been listening to my headspaces, everyone who's been joining, commenting, subscribing. Don't forget to press the subscription button and click all of the notifications so you can see all of my uploads. But it's been moving wonderfully, and I just always like to say thank you for everyone who's liking, sharing, commenting, and also those who are donating, because please do donate. It helps me to create regular content for you and to keep everything fresh and running well. I'm very partial to 3 wings and chips and a Maduro or a Bitcoin. Don't be shy. Jump all up in it, darlings. Right, let me just jump straight into this particular question. Why is America interested in deposing Mr. Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela? So before I jump into answering the question as to why Mr. Trump wants to depose Mr. Maduro in Venezuela, it's important to just provide a little historical context so that you can look at things in the round. Starting in the early 19th century, the US has always had a special interest in Venezuela because of its oil reserves and its oil potential. During the Second World War, Venezuela became strategically significant, and the country was a major supplier of oil to the Allies, and both the Axis and Allied powers sought to control influence over its oil production during this period. After World War II, the Venezuelan oil industry continued to grow, attracting further US investment. And up until that point, American-led companies maintained a strong presence in Venezuela, benefiting from favorable agreements with favorable governments. Then during the 1970s, nationalisation thought it would rear its head. And under President Rafael Caldera, they took steps towards nationalising the oil industry in the early 70s. They introduced taxes on oil production and passed laws to ensure that companies' assets reverted to the state. And unsurprisingly, this move was met with resistance from US oil companies. During the 1980s and the 1990s, Venezuela faced economic challenges, including a global oil glut, and that led to declining prices. This was also assisted by the US, the decline of Venezuela as an economic power. Because after the West-leaning president lost his seat to Hugo Chavez, he preceded the centrist leader, 2-time president, Rafael Caldera. Rafael Caldera brought in an IMF loan supported by, of course, the World Bank, which then impoverished the country and helped to plunge it into further economic decline. And let's not forget that sanctions have been imposed by every administration in America since Bush Sr. So from 2006 to 2008, George Bush targeted sanctions against the Venezuelan government. This was intensified under Barack Obama with an executive order that addressed Venezuela as a national security threat to America. And then under Donald Trump in 2017, that's when the sanctions were really ramped up. They created food shortages of medicine, helped to increase hyperinflation, and also devalue Venezuela's currency. You had malnutrition, medical shortages, and a severe economic strain on the government. That persisted until 2019. And during this period, Hugo Chavez, who was the leader at the time, he served for 13 years. Nicolas Maduro came in as the interim leader and also then became president with elections, which the Americas did not recognize. So in 2019, when he was elected, a number of Western-leaning states did not recognize Mr. Maduro as the natural and proper leader. they said it was rigged, which is ridiculous. I mean, over here in the West, we have rigged elections, but no one would call it that. No, of course not. But everywhere else, their elections are not fair and they're never good. So that's the reason why Mr. Maduro had to be indicted. So in 2020, so after he was elected again, because he was elected in 2015, and then again, he went to the elections, I think it was 2015, he won, then he went back again in 2019, and by this time the country's in an economic state. They don't forget Venezuela has some of the largest oil reserves on the planet. This, in my opinion, is the reason why the vast majority of the Western-leaning governments do not think that he's a legitimate leader. Now what's happened is the President Trump has decided that Mr. Maduro is very much like Pablo Escobar, and he's the leader of a drug cartel, and they want to remove him from office, and they've sent gunboats and ships just off the coast of the Caribbean so that they can help to depose the democratic leader. And the reason I gave you all that information about the context and the political circumstances, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. So if I were to answer my question, why is Mr. Trump seeking to depose Mr. Maduro? The reason, in my opinion, he's seeking to depose Mr. Maduro is because he wants to, one, control the oil in that region. And I think the number of reserves are, Venezuela has 304 billion barrels of oil. And that was in 2023. And they want control of that. And the oil reserves were nationalized fully under Hugo Chavez. And also what Hugo Chavez did, who was the anti-imperialist, anti-hegemonic leader of Venezuela, he set up a raft of social programs. He created and supported indigenous rights over land, assets and basic human rights, and created more of Venezuelans' citizens as voters and got in. And ever since then, he's not there anymore because he passed away, but his government and the left-leaning parts of his government have been under attack. Let's not forget that that Venezuela is not a full partner of BRICS, but it's deemed as almost like a temporary partner because Brazil blocked its full ascension into BRICS, which is interesting. Lula did that. But by the same token, they are an important member of the BRICS family. You know, Russia and China have had huge amounts of investment because they need Venezuela's oil for their own development. So this is the reason in my book we've suddenly seen him, Mr. Maduro, and many members of administration cast by the American administration as hoodlums and bandits. And because America is the world's police person, which they've just anointed upon themselves, they need to go in and support the ordinary Venezuelans so that they can have their rightful leader, which none of them actually recognize anyway. So in my opinion, the reason that Venezuela is being bullied at this point is because America wants a Western-facing government in Venezuela so that they can have access to those oils and they can also disrupt the progress of BRICS, in my opinion. What I thought was really interesting that Mr. Maduro did as a response to that, because there's a bounty of his head of 50 million, he said, I will give 50 million to anybody who can expose the Epstein list. What an interesting counterplay, because everybody knows that this is a bit of a smokescreen to take your eye off of what's happening with the Epstein list, the fact that America cannot stop what's going on in the world, especially in the Ukraine. And they've got massive domestic issues that nobody's paying attention to. Not even that administration. And this idea of a war on drugs. I mean, we've been having a war on drugs for the past 50 years. I mean, it's a crappy war. Nobody's winning. And no one's ever going to address the question of why people want to take those drugs. So you're only ever dealing with the supply end as opposed to the demand end. So to me, it's a pointless exercise. It's just something for good PR. And I think that's where we are with this. This is about PR. This is about removing your attention off of other things that Mr. Trump doesn't want you to look at. And it's also an imperialist adventure into hegemony. Basically, as far as America's concerned, any countries in a specific vicinity, it constitutes their backyard. I mean, even that concept in itself is racist. It's not your backyard. It's like 1,000 miles from your border, but yet you still think that you can determine what goes on there. And this is the problem. America still thinks America is under the delusion, like the rest of Europe, that they are running the world, when in fact they're not. And I don't think that the government in Venezuela and its people and its allies are going to be accepting of a diktat off of their shores, threatening them with gunboats. So to conclude this thought, these few thoughts I've just shared with you about what's going on in Venezuela, they're trying to get Venezuelan oil. That is what America's trying to do. They're trying to disrupt BRICS and BRICS' progress, and they're also seeing themselves as a enforcer of their will by virtue of saying, I'll do whatever I like. But the problem with this approach is that the world has moved on. They don't have to go to the World Bank anymore. They don't need to go to Western institutions anymore for loan support or development. They can go elsewhere. And the only people who are not aware of that is the 12% of the world which constitutes the global north. The other 87% realize that we've moved on, and we'll just have to wait for the rest of them to catch up. And that's exactly what's happening here with Mr. Maduro. So do I think America's going to invade? No, I don't. Do I think they're going to put, boots on the ground in Venezuela? How about no? One of the legacies of Mr. Chavez was community militias. Everybody's armed over there, and you've only got 4,000 Marines. That is not a sufficient number. And I doubt that the local community is going to help in an orchestrated coup to depose Mr. Maduro. This isn't the Ukraine, and it's not 2014. So that's my 2 pence. What do you think? Do you think America's interested in the oil, or do you believe that they're being overrun by drugs from Venezuela and Mr. Maduro is the head of the cartel? Or do you think Mr. Trump is grasping at straws because his domestic agenda and his international agenda isn't moving in the direction that he'd planned? Or do you think that Europe and the Western world are living in an alternative universe, suffering from delusions of grandeur based on their past and not the reality of the world that we currently live in? Let me know what your thoughts are. Jump up in the comments. Come on the podium. Like, share and comment. I look forward to your contribution. Thank you for your listening ear, and I'll see you next week, and cut!